maybe get the mic. Professional YouTuber. Hello number ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking, and were medieval knights jacked? Define jacked. Okay, so today's video has to do with a little bit of a curiosity, if you will. A question that I think often many of us, including you, have asked, or perhaps just wondered. And in order to respond it, we're going to jump into the sources, iconography, manuscript illuminations, and a little reason and logic. So, if by jacked you mean this, then the answer is probably not. Already the first thing we need to take out the window, of course, is anything from the bodybuilding world that isn't natural. Of course, the occasional really big guy would have been a thing, absolutely. In fact, we know from records that in the medieval period, we had more giants and more midgets, meaning that gigantism and dwarfism were not treated as they are today, and therefore you could have had a really big guy. Now, with the obvious out of the way, when we look at iconography to try and figure out what is the average physique and looks, appearance of a medieval knight, we come into contact with a problem. The problem being that they are usually dressed. Either they are clad in armor, like in this case, like who the heck knows what kind of muscularity this guy has, since he's literally covered in steel. And this tends to happen even if we go all the way back to something like the Bayeux Tapestry, 1066. I mean, this is a war scenario, so of course you're not going to see anyone shirtless. This is in the Gauls. However, in general, even if we for a moment look at proportions, sizes, it does appear that we have relatively slender physiques. And man, sucks to be him. The other situation that we encounter oftentimes is to see nobles and knights dressed but not in battle gear. And this is a good example here. We only have one individual who's wearing what appears to be some sort of placard created in brigandine style, but the rest of the medieval individuals, men that we have here, are all wearing arming doublets, and of course we are in the 15th century. Now, I own a very similar style of doublet myself that was based on the paintings by Piero della Francesca, Tuscany, late 15th century, and as you can see already, one thing that I do appreciate apart from the colorful repertoire that we see, I love the fact that most of them, in fact, is it all of them? It is all of them, except for this guy, are wearing a hat to complete the outfit. I also appreciate that there is a certain palette, like it's intentional. I love that. And there is a lot of long hair. Now, given whether the hair is long or it's short, it's a little bit of a perspective situation, isn't it? Maybe for you, these guys have long hair when it's down to their shoulders, but for me, were you talking about long down to the shoulders? Come on, give me a break. Yeah, life is perspective, isn't it? Let's say longish. I'll give him longish. Anyways, if we look at the physiques once again, one thing you will notice is a tight waist, right? So these guys here, they might have muscular arms. In fact, this man here, the one with the beard, seems to be gripping the bicep of this guy. And, there is stuff to grip, I think. So maybe they have biceps, triceps, maybe some shoulders. Still not a huge bodybuilder style of physique, if you will. Now, as I was saying, a lot of iconography shows them in full armor, but there are some exceptions. These exceptions are a thing when we involve rabbits, my friend. Rabbits. And to be precise,
killer rabbits.
Yeah, believe it or not, this is a thing. Rabbits murdering everyone. It's either this is a trope, a joke that medieval people loved, or maybe there is something the government doesn't want you to know about our past. Regardless. So there is a guy here who's been beheaded, I guess, at the behest of this giant rabbit. And what can we say? Yeah, lean physique, tight waist, probably developed chest up to a certain extent, and by the way, his deltoids look, I would say he does have some shoulders, so overall an athletic, lean body, possibly with some muscle, but nothing huge, if you will. Here is another one who is dealing with the rabbits, but this one is particularly thin, maybe a biblical reference though, so there is that to be taken into consideration, because we can see his rib cage. This guy really needs to increase the protein intake. This guy here is being beaten to death and skinned alive. Goodness gracious, rabbits. We do see a little bit of a developed pec, maybe. Now, of course, it's not like we can trust the art to represent every single medieval person, and in fact, we can't even say that maybe this was average simply because it could be an artistic convention, or device, if you will, in the way people were represented when unclothed. It's an indication, but it's not like 100% representative. This one is 100% representative. Medieval knights were definitely muscular and physically powerful, but jacked in the modern bodybuilding sense, we would say not quite. Their physiques were built for function over form, creating a very different kind of strength than what we see in gyms today. It is highly likely that due to their constant training, knights did develop muscle mass. They used all sorts of weapon training, they were wearing their armor, training since they were 7, and in general, hand-to-hand combat does require a certain level of upper body and core strength, together with dexterity and being athletic and precision. Archaeological evidence from knight burials does show enlarged muscle attachment points on bones, indicating well-developed shoulders, arms, and backs. Their leg bones also often show signs of extensive horseback riding, with pronounced muscle markers from gripping with their thighs and controlling war horses. However, remember that a medieval saddle functions very differently to a modern saddle. Let me see if I can illustrate the point. Look at this image. If you look at the knights, they don't really appear to be seated in the way that a modern horse riding feels. If you really look at it, they appear to be almost standing. If you're enjoying this video so far, please take a moment to check out my Patreon page. With as little as a $5 support, you can help us ensure that we can continue to produce high quality and high researched content. And at the same time, you get access to polls, extra videos, unlisted streams, and much more. Thank you so much. Because of the way medieval saddles functions, the knight is using the horse as a fighting platform, but the position is really not the seated one. The legs are elongated and it's as if he's putting some pressure down here for balance and control. A medieval knight on a horse does appear to be almost standing. He's not standing, but almost. Therefore, while there might be a certain level of overlap between modern horse riding and medieval horse riding, they would not develop the exact same muscles. We also have to remember that in general medieval physiques looked different from modern fitness ideals. Knights likely had thick, strong muscle when it was in the functional areas, with a lower body fat percentage than regular average people today, due to the fact that they were constantly training, and their diets were not McDonald's and high sugar based. Now, all of that is fascinating, but what do the sources, specifically medieval period sources, say? Medieval artwork and literature occasionally do describe knights, and they tell us that they are physically impressive. Chronicles mentions knights who could leap into the saddle while fully armored, or even bend horseshoes with their bare hands. These, of course, are rare instances and proof of exceptionalism rather than norm. However, they do suggest that at least in the medieval mind, knights were known for exceptional strength, even by medieval standards. The knightly class also had access to better nutrition than most people, with regular meat, dairy, and varied diets that supported muscle development. It is very likely, in fact, that medieval knights would have been, on average, taller than commoners and peasants. Maybe not this much taller, though. Also, another thing that we tend to forget when it comes to the medieval world is the following. Not only they were constantly training, so we can see here I found another one that looks shirtless a little bit, and we see kind of reasonably broad shoulders up to a certain extent, but in general they train a lot, right? So you have to imagine that sword fighting, fencing, sure that there is the whole lever mechanics and the way you use the sword, but also there is grappling involved, as we can see here, and grappling in armor. So you know that must be, if you do this constantly, you have to develop strength and muscle. So in other words, maybe a medieval knight's physique would be in between a bodybuilder who trains for hypertrophy for certain muscle groups only, and a power lifter, someone who actually develops strength. Kind of an in-between, probably. But here's the other thing that we often forget, and it is crucial to this discussion. The world they lived in had a different type of physicality every day. Think about it this way. What do? With our jobs, spend most of our times sitting, maybe at a desk, at our computer. After the job, which is already quite sedentary, is over, the 9 to 5, what do? We drive home. We're sitting again. Then we get off the car. Do we go up the stairs? No, often we take a lift or an elevator. Then we are home, kick our shoes off, watch TV, and then in the evening we're back at the computer sitting. This is nothing like a medieval lifestyle. In the Middle Ages, a knight would have woken up in the morning, going up and down a monumental amount of stairs and towers already, if he lives in a castle. But then again, even if he doesn't live in a castle and it's a farmer, they're still going up and down the hills and walking around the forest, the woods. Walking, in fact, probably why they look so lean. They would have walked everywhere. So not only they are training for combat and making sure that they are fit, that they have power, that they have endurance, but they walk everywhere. They go up and down the stairs, then they go to church, right? So they're walking to church after they got dressed, and after church they're walking, or perhaps they're riding a horse. But then again, riding a horse, it's still a lot more physical than driving a car, isn't it? And so let's say that he's now riding a horse and then he goes to the local inn, perhaps. Yeah, he will sit down. Maybe they will dance after that. That's still physical. Then he will train because that's part of his day. Then after the training is over, he has to walk all the way up the hill. Maybe then they will go on a hunt, and that's another physical one. Fox hunting, for instance, in the woods. Then they need to go to another town. It's not like they can drive there. So the physicality of the world in which they're in would put them in a position of being in a completely different level of athleticism, but also fitness than us, unless you're a fitness freak, and I know you are. Going back to the burials, there are several specific medieval knight burials that have been archaeologically examined, providing fascinating insights into their physical condition and lifestyle. For instance, the Hereford Cathedral Knight from England, 12th to 14th century. The most famous example is a 5-foot 8-inch man found at Hereford Cathedral, who was described as the most battered corpse on the site, with the largest numbers of broken bones. He had serious trauma to his right shoulder blade, 10 of his right ribs and left leg, suggesting extensive jousting injuries. He was probably around 45-year-old, and analysis of his teeth suggested that he was raised in Normandy and moved to Hereford later in life. When it comes to my position and suggestion that probably medieval knights and nobility would have been on average taller than the regular population, we have the Gdansk Knight finding in Poland, 13th or 14th century, recently discovered under an ice cream shop. This knight measured 170 to 180 centimeters, so 5.7 to 5'11", making him taller than the average medieval European. And the bones in this case are in excellent conditions despite centuries underground. Last but not least, we have the examinations of the Cambridge Medieval Cemeteries, England from the 10th to the 14th century. This is a comprehensive study which examined 314 individuals from 3 Cambridge cemeteries. These burials reveal the medieval warriors often showed signs of significant trauma, robust muscle attachment points on bones indicating heavy physical activity, and heights that varied considerably. The bone evidence supports the idea that knights were indeed physically powerful, though their builds were likely more functional than purely aesthetic, shaped by constant training with weapons and armor rather than modern bodybuilding techniques. Alright, number ones, but I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please remember thumbs up, and if you have other questions, let me know in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching. Bye.